Fort Knox 5 and Fort Knox Recordings were launched in 2003 by Steve Raskin, Rob Myers, Sid Barcelona, and John Horvath. Now, these guys, their focus was funk for the dance floor, and the label's gone on to drop over 100 releases and many more artists, including some of DC's greats. In addition to all the great music they have released, and shows played around the world, Fort Knox 5 and Fort Knox Recordings have licensed a lot of music to movies, video games, and other places as well. So it's really branched out. And Andy joined the team in 2008. And in addition to serving as label manager, he also manages the various bands and artists on the label as well. So I first came across these guys' music when I was first starting the show. I think it was Black Masala was the first band where I ended up connecting with Andy. And now it's such a treat, listeners, for me to be able to introduce these guys to you and have them here. So guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This is really cool. And so now tell us about, let's start with the track that we just played now. That was for Fort Knox 5. Tell us about Fort Knox 5.
Well, I think one of the interesting things you actually mentioned, Fort Knox 5 has always been about funk at the root of it all, and that track in particular was a collaboration that was destined to happen. We are always celebrate DC music, and we're very much supportive of the whole DC music scene, and for us to be able to collaborate with a DC legend like Sir Joe Quarterman, who paved the way for what we're doing really right now, which is representing DC with some funky dance music. And actually, that was a great story. We actually got to meet, I'm a longtime fan of Sir Joe Quarterman. He did a project called The Free Soul back in the 70s, and had a song called I Got So Much Trouble on My Mind. Fantastic funk song, one of those old school kind of Funk 45 things. And actually through Andy's connection with the Funk Parade, we had the privilege of actually getting introduced to Mr. Joe Quarterman.
Yeah, it was really cool to meet him. You know, I mean, he's a DC legend, and I go to the Funk Parade meetings, and there's Joe Quarterman. And so we just kind of approached him and said, hey, are you interested in making some new music together? And next thing you know, he comes into the studio, and these guys made this great track, which is an instant classic, really.
I love how those stories come together and how you just suddenly magically end up with magical tracks like that. It just
Absolutely.
And the connections. It's getting to know folks around town. I love that. So, and I'm dying to know the story behind the name. What Fort Knox? What? Tell me the story.
Well, it's like all good stories. It starts with more of a legend than anything else. Now, Fort Knox 5 was always it was kind of an inside joke between us. There, like you mentioned before, with Rob Myers, Sid Barcelona, and John Horvath, and myself, the four of us together were doing this project, and I kept calling it the Fort Knox 5, even though there was no fifth member, because none of us are really vocalists. And so the fifth member really became everyone that we collaborated with. And so from the get-go, we always joked about how all our favorite bands came in fives. It was the Fort Knox 5, just like Jurassic 5, and the MC 5, and Jackson 5. I mean, there's so many. All the bands came in five. It's like, name a four band. There's no fours. The Fantastic Four, the Funky Four, there were very few. They were all in fives. And the five kind of really encapsulated what we wanted to do with music in general, which was about collaboration. And as instrumentalists, the whole point of us doing Fort Knox Recordings as an extension of Fort Knox 5 was to really celebrate the DC music scene. And that's been really our ethos from the beginning. So Fort Knox 5 is the four.
That's amazing. So four of you guys together with a fifth member is the Fort Knox 5.
That really completes the sound.
And then Fort Knox Recordings, then was that just an extension of Fort Knox 5? Now it's going to be recordings too?
Yeah, well, no, and actually the Fort Knox 5, the name itself came as a joke. We used to call our recording studio just Fort Knox because all we had was the music, and the music was our gold. And so the Fort Knox was sort of a tongue-in-cheek when our studio was in the hood, and you're like, yeah, we got nothing to steal here except the music.
Except the music. I
so
get it
Fort
now.
Knox,
Fort Knox. Holding tight the music.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that.
And the classical, the label compilation, The New Gold Standard, kind of sets that that also a part. You know, it's like the gold in Fort Knox. And
Is
here it
really
is.
just the tunes.
There you go. So the name of the label that you guys have is
The name of the label is Fort Knox Recordings too, and like you had mentioned in the intro, we launched the label and the group at the exact same time. The label was a vehicle for us to be able to do a collaboration with the idea of making funky dance music, really celebrating DC.
That's amazing. And Andy, how did you get linked up with these guys? What's the story there?
So I've known a bunch of them since way back in the 90s, you know, from the music scene, and especially the co-founder, John Horvath. Him and I were real tight. And then in the mid-2000s, when they were ready to, sort of take the label to the next level, start releasing a bunch of other artists, Impresarios, CI, Nappy Rhythm, they were interested in bringing on somebody who could help them build the foundation and build the platform larger. And that's where I came in. And then that's when we started really, you know, fleshing out the full identity and bringing in all these different artists and releasing so many great projects, which we continue to do.
And holy smokes, I've featured a lot of those artists you just mentioned. They've got profiles on the site. Phenomenal music coming from those guys. Some of my favorite jams are from some of those guys. So
Absolutely.
it is really cool to see what you guys have built here. That's amazing. Now, go ahead. I want you to clarify if someone comes to see a Fort Knox 5 show, what can they expect to see?
Well, actually, that's interesting that you say that too, because given the name Fort Knox 5 and the sort of a mythical confusion behind it, what are we, a band? Is it a DJ? We make dance music inherently, but we've done so many different incarnations of it. We've done the full live band where we had horn sections, live drums, bass, all of us playing live instrumentation, but that's been few and far between. More often than not, Fort Knox 5 I've been traveling, representing Fort Knox 5, playing DJ sets, eclectic DJ sets, mixing originals, instrumentals, remixes, collaborators, all into the sets. And so from the 5 becomes a single DJ set, and then as an extension of that, John and I, the original founding member John, we've been doing a 4-turntable or a 4-deck set where we were doing live everything that we were doing in the studio, this sort of mashup kind of culture, but we were doing it live. So we play instrumentals and acapellas and take our acapella and put it on top of a Biggie song, or taking all these things and sort of interchanging these things. And so we've really, that's something that we've been doing really as a festival thing. So the Fort Knox 5 4-deck set now includes our collaborator Jason Queued Up, who we're putting out his new single. And the two of us go out and do that same kind of 4-deck set. So it's
cool.
Fort Knox 5 solo, the 4-deck set, and then occasionally the live band.
And for listeners who don't know what a 4-deck set means, what is that?
Well, it's like I was sort of saying, four turntables that we're syncing up live, not as a pre-planned set, as almost as jamming, as a mashup, as a live mashup, where we can take our songs and use other people's vocals on top of it, or our instrumentals. It's sort of a jigsaw puzzle of live music, creating so that it's not just sequencing songs as a DJ set. It's creating the actual songs are created on the spot.
Got it. So now, what for you guys outside of the music scene now? What are your other? Do you have other hobbies? What else? If they were to meet you outside of this stuff, what might they see you doing?
Well, Andy, I don't know.
I'm a history professor. So
Really?
absolutely, I'm an adjunct professor out at Nova Annandale.
Wow! Shout out to the Nova kids who might be
Absolutely,
listening. All right.
You may have had Professor Cerutti.
Cool.
You know.
I love it. All right. So also adjunct. I like that. Okay. What else you got?
Well, and I'm actually a graphic designer by trade, and when I first started in the DC music scene, even way back going back to the 90s, the punk rock days, I used to design a lot of album packaging and specializing in DC local music. I used to do from Jawbox to Girls Against Boys, a lot of the old DC punk stuff, and then from that I started doing national bands like Bad Religion. I designed some of their record covers. And then through that, I actually met the Thievery Corporation guys and started designing their records. So in terms of a lot
of design,
Design
now, okay,
is
that's
sort of
design. Tell me, how did music come into both of your lives? What's the story there?
For me, music has always been like an integral part of it. I think as a visual artist and as a musical artist, I think they kind of go hand in hand. Watching old spy chase movies and blaxploitation movies, really, that inspired me more to make music than the actual music of the time, because it's more of a feeling. I tend to be more inspired creatively by visual things that put in ideas as opposed to sort of like imitating or emulating kind of things. But I think they go hand in hand, and so
hence the graphic designer thing you were
hence
talking
the
about.
graphic designer.
But you also play an instrument. What instrument?
I play I play bass, guitar, keyboards. In the live setting, I play bass.
Got it.
But in the studio, it's one of the things that I love about making modern electronic music or electronic based music is that as a multi-instrumentalist, I can sit there and do this orchestration that I could never have done before. If I want a string section or a horn section, I can kind of concoct it and maybe and structure it, and then we have some amazingly talented musicians here in DC that to be able to get Frank Mitchell or some of the other horn guys to come in and be able to do horn section and replay these ideas that you can kind of get into your mind is one of the most amazing things about our collective group of friends.
That's cool. Now, Andy, what about you? How did music come into you? That's totally different from history professor. So
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually pretty easy for me to explain it because in 1994, I started working at Tower Records. And I worked there
Tower
for
Records. I remember those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have a lot of friends from Tower.
Nice.
It's still a big part of my life. And I worked there for several years, and I became a singles buyer.
Okay.
So I got an office in the back, and I'm dealing with the representatives and the sales charts and data. And really, that's where it really began for me on the business side. I'm not a musician, so I do business and management side.
I see.
And around that same time, I linked up with a DJ, DJ Slant from here in Washington, D.C., and we formed a company, Too Tough Productions, and we threw countless events and concerts and tours and special shows promoting drum and bass music, which in a roundabout way is how I became linked up with these guys. So
That's
it's
amazing.
a true DC story through and through.
Exactly.
Now, for both of you guys, one of the questions I love to ask is if you could offer one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I would always say, when people ask me that kind of question, there's so many different things to say. But the truth of the matter is, if you really want to do something, just don't give up and do it. Don't rely on someone else to do it. I think part of that is the DC ethos of growing up in the punk scene, which is if you wanted to do a show, put a show together. It's if you want to put out a record, you want to do a recording, go and do it. There's nothing really stopping you.
Absolutely. I say longevity, perseverance.
Yeah,
It's right when you think that it's time to quit, that's just when you're getting started. So you got to stick in it. I mean, if you're not prepared for decades of commitment, you're not in the right field. So.
Wow. Okay, stick with it. God, great messages, guys. I dig it. And now, one other fun question. What's one thing in your music collection that might surprise us?
Well,
Come
I don't
on,
know.
Steve. Don't hold out on us now.
I-
Andy started laughing because there's something there. What do you got?
Well, yeah. I in the same way that I like 60s and 70s car chases, I also like really cheesy music from the 60s and 70s too. It's what would be considered light and fluffy, maybe like bossa nova light, a lot of cha-cha kind of stuff.
Really? Mm-hmm. So we talking like Girl from Ipanema?
Oh
like
yeah,
the
Girl
classic?
from Ipanema. Yeah, sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess that also makes sense because like Fort
Makes
Knox
a little
5,
sense. Yeah, sure.
it's still the big band and actual instruments, and it's not
Exactly.
just electronic. I got not too much of a stretch. I got you. What about you, Andy?
I've had so many musical phases. It's hard to pinpoint one. But maybe, so I had a phase where I went through the Grateful Dead and, some jam music, which is not something that's a big part of my life now.
Yeah.
But I feel like it played a role in sort of shaping my musical development.
That's amazing, guys. All right, so now if listeners want to find out more about you guys or follow you guys online, or where do they go to find out more about you?
FortKnoxRecordings.com is absolutely a great spot. FortKnox5.com because we have so much going on that we kind of have to parcel it out between the label, and the artist.
Right.
So
Which is great problems to have.
Sure,
There's just
exactly.
so much cool stuff happening. I love
And
it.
find us on, especially we have tons and tons of mixes. Go to SoundCloud.com, Fort Knox 5. We do a series called Funk the World, which is basically what it says, inspired funk from across the globe. Different types of genres, hours and hours and hours of music to be entertained to.
yeah, I mean every platform, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Twitter, you name it, you'll find us there. Fort Knox or Fort Knox 5.